I've been thinking about why certain characters stay with you for years after you finish a book. Not the plot, the world, the character, specific person. And I don't think it's because they were written perfectly. I think it's because somewhere in the middle of reading, you stopped watching them and started feeling like you knew them. I want to talk about how that happens. This video is about the specific moments that make a reader fall in love with a character. Not the big dramatic scenes, but the small quiet ones that slip past your defenses before you realize what's happening. By the end, I want to show you what I think is actually happening in these moments, and why understanding it changed the way I write characters entirely. Welcome everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Daniel, and this is the Story Renaissance. If you've ever finished a draft and felt like your character was technically there, but somehow unreachable, like they were behind glass, this is for you. Because I had that problem for a long time, and I couldn't name it. The plot was working, the structure was fine, but nobody was connecting with the people I was writing, and that's a lonely feeling. To have worked that hard and still feel like something essential is missing. I think a lot of writers feel this, but they don't say it out loud. We assume everyone else has it figured out, and we're the only ones on the outside of it. So I went back to the books I loved, characters I couldn't shake, and I just started paying attention to the exact moments where something shifted, where I stopped reading about a character and started caring what happened to them. Here's what I found. It's almost never the heroic moments that make me fall for a character. It's the moment right before it, the hesitation, the thing they're afraid of that they don't quite manage to hide. Vulnerability does something to us as readers that I don't think we give enough credit to. When a character is genuinely uncertain, genuinely scared, something in us recognizes it before we even consciously register what we're feeling. We've been in that place. Maybe not in those stakes, but in that feeling. And that recognition is quiet, but it opens something up. Gandalf on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm is the example I keep coming back to. He's powerful, exposed, nearly mythic up to that point in the story. But in that moment, you feel the weight of what he's carrying. The danger isn't abstract. It's in his voice and the deliberateness of his choices. He knows what's at stake, the lives of everyone behind him. He knows what he's facing. You can feel him making the calculations in real time. Even he can be in over his head. Even he doesn't know if this is going to work out. That crack, that moment where you see him genuinely afraid, not for himself, but for what happens if he fails, that's what made me feel something. Not the magic, what's underneath the magic. The person choosing to stand there anyway. I started asking myself in my own drafts, where does my character feel small? Because that's usually where the reader starts to lean forward. But vulnerability only opens the door. What keeps a reader inside is something a little quieter, and most writers walk right past it without realizing what they had. Quick aside, if you've been writing characters that feel flat and you're not sure why, I run a community for writers called Story Renaissance. We work through this kind of thing together every week. The link's in the description below. All right, back to it. The second moment is easy to underestimate because it doesn't feel dramatic. It's a character making a small, decent choice that nobody around them notices or rewards, but readers notice. And it builds something that I can only describe as trust, not admiration, something warmer and more personal than that. The feeling that this person is good all the way through, not just when the stakes are high enough to demand it. Marge Gunderson in Fargo does this so well. She's patient with people who don't deserve her patience. She treats everyone, witnesses, suspects, strangers who are rude to her, like they matter. She listens. She asks follow-up questions. She doesn't rush people or talk down to them, and nobody thanks her for it. The film doesn't make a big deal of it. There's no big music swell when she's kind to someone, but you see it every time, and it accumulates into something that feels almost like knowing her. Like if you met her in real life, she'd be exactly this person. By the end, I wasn't just rooting for her to solve the case. I was rooting for her whole life, for her to go home to her husband and eat that buffet and live in that quiet, decent world that she's built. In my own work, I've learned to look for those moments and fight to keep them in. They're the first thing that gets cut when you're tightening a draft because they don't move the plot, but they're often doing more emotional work than the scenes that do. The thing is, though, respect and trust aren't the same as love. The next moment is the one that gets closest to love, and it's almost impossible to manufacture. This is the hardest one to talk about because it resists instruction. It's the moment a character surprises you with something genuine. A laugh at the wrong time, A flash of self-awareness, a small, honest reaction that you weren't expecting and couldn't have predicted. It's the moment they stop being a character and start feeling like a person. Elizabeth Bennet laughing at Darcy at the Meryton Assembly is one of the best examples I know. It's such a small moment in the book, but in that laugh, you see everything. Her wit, her refusal to be flattered by status or intimidated by wealth, her willingness to trust her own read on someone over what's socially expected of her. She hears him insult her, and instead of being hurt or deferential, she finds it ridiculous, and she lets herself laugh. It's a window straight into who she is. Someone who sees through pretense and refuses to pretend she doesn't. And once you've looked through that window, you're in. You want to follow her wherever the story goes, not because you admire her, but because she feels real, because you recognize that laugh. You've had that moment where someone revealed themselves and all you could do was find it absurd. I've started thinking of these moments as gifts you leave for the reader. You can't engineer them exactly, but you can slow down enough to let them happen. And once a reader has seen that flash of real humanity in your character, they're paying attention differently. We're watching for the next one, which is exactly when the fourth moment can hit the hardest. What I've noticed about sacrifice in the stories that stay with me is that it only works when the cost is specific. Not they gave something up in a general narrative sense, but you understand exactly what it meant to them, and you feel what it means to lose it. Tyrion Lannister at the Bridge of Blackwater does this for me in a way I didn't expect the first time I read it. He's not built to be a hero. He has every reason to protect himself, to let someone else carry the weight of it, but he doesn't. He comes up with a wildfire plan knowing it could backfire. He goes to the front lines when he could stay behind the walls. He stands there, exposed, rallying soldiers who don't respect him and never will. And it doesn't even redeem him in the eyes of the people he's protecting. That's what makes it land so hard. He doesn't get the glory. He gets the blame when things go wrong and silence when they go right. The sacrifice isn't clean, isn't rewarded, and that's exactly what makes it feel true. Because real sacrifice rarely is. When the cost of the sacrifice is real and specific, and we understand what it means to the character personally, something shifts in the reader. We stop being observers. We become witnesses. And witnesses feel responsible in a way that observers don't. They stay. But even that isn't the deepest moment. The last one is the one I think creates the most lasting connection, and it's the one that took me the longest to understand how to write. There's a moment in certain stories where a character just stops managing their image, stops performing, and what's underneath is complicated and honest and completely themselves. It doesn't always come as a big revelation scene. Sometimes it's quieter than that. But when it happens, you feel it. The character is just showing you something true, something they could have hidden, and they didn't. Jane Eyre refusing Rochester is that moment for her. She's in love with him. She could have the life, the security, the person she wants, and she says no. Not because she doesn't want it, but because she knows who she is, what she can live with, and what she can't. She doesn't hide behind pride or anger, pretend she's fine. She tells him exactly what it cost her to leave. She shows you the longing and the clarity at the same time, in the same breath. It's heartbreaking, and it's completely her. There's no performance, no attempt to make herself look stronger or less affected than she is. And I love her more in that moment than at any other point in the book. More than when she's clever or resilient or admirable, because she's just honest. Completely, painfully honest about what she feels and what she won't compromise. That kind of honesty is rare. When you see it in a character, it stays with you. I think this moment works because it asks something of the reader, too. When a character is that honest, it's an invitation to sit with them in the difficulty. So stop looking for an easier way through it. And readers who accept that invitation don't just finish the book, they carry it. Here's what I think is actually happening in all 5 of these moments. And it took me longer than I'd like to admit to see it clearly. We don't fall in love with characters because they're impressive or well-constructed or even likable. We fall in love with them because they reflect something back at us. The vulnerability we recognize from our own life, the quiet integrity we wish we showed more of, the humor that sounds like something we would think, the sacrifice that makes us quietly ask what we would have done, the honesty that makes us want to be more honest. The most unforgettable characters aren't wish fulfillment, they're mirrors. They show us something true about being human, the complicated, contradictory, trying our best version of it. And in seeing that, we see ourselves a little more clearly too. That's what I'm reaching for in my own work. Not a perfect character, a true one. Someone who earns that mirror. If you've been working on a character who isn't connecting yet, if you can feel the gap between who they are on the page and who you know them to be, and you're not sure how to close it, I built a space for that. It's called the Story Renaissance. It's a community of writers sitting with exactly this kind of question. We have a weekly Write Together live stream where you can just show up and work on the character, on the draft, on whatever you're trying to figure out. And we talk about this stuff, about what it actually feels like to try to write someone true, and why it's so hard, and how to keep going when it isn't working yet. No pressure, no gurus, just writers who understand that the gap between the character you imagine and the one on the page is part of the process, and that staying in it is the whole job. The link's in the description and the pinned comment below. I'd love to have you there. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Readers fall in love in moments, not chapters. A crack in the armor, a quiet, decent choice, a flash of real humanity, a sacrifice that costs something specific, a moment of complete honesty. None of these require a perfect character. They'll just require a true one. Now that you understand this, the next video you need to watch is this one I made about the emotional middle, because that's where most writers quit, and it's exactly where these character moments need to happen. That video shows you what's really going on when the project feels broken, and how to keep going anyway. I'll see you there.